Welcome to the National Women's Fitness Academy podcast. We're here to talk about women's health, female hormones, body image, and all things health and fitness.
Hello girls, and welcome back to another episode of the Women's Fitness Academy's podcast. I'm your host, Siggy, one of the WFA's educators and a women's online coach. Today, we've got Asha, who is a women's fitness coach. Not only she's a coach, but she also holds a two-time Australian triathlon champion. And that's something that I've already said before we started recording that's something I'm wanting us to talk a little bit more about today. And Asha and I have only connected recently, so we haven't really had much of a chance to talk about, one another and connect. So I think this is a great opportunity for us to have a better understanding of, what it is that you're doing, your background in fitness. And so before I continue rambling on, Asha, do you mind telling our listeners a bit of a summary about who you are and what pursued you to become a coach in the fitness industry?
Yeah, definitely. So, as Siggy said, my background is triathlon, and I actually did my certificate 3 and 4 in fitness when I was training and racing as an athlete, because I thought, what am I going to do when I retire? And I know and love health and fitness. So I also wanted the personal education for myself, but I also knew that it was going to be a career tool. So yeah, that's what started me in my health and fitness career.
I love that. So good. Let's take it back before we step into what you're doing now about your experience of being a triathlon champion. Maybe run us through how did you get started doing this and what pursued you to continue doing that to become a champion?
Yeah, definitely. Well, when I was younger, I grew up on the Gold Coast, quite close to the beach, and I was involved in surf life saving and nippers, and I always really loved running, especially long distance cross country running and some of the longer distance athletics events. And the Queensland Academy of Sport sent me a letter when I was 14 identifying me for having talent in the sport of triathlon. And this is back when they were looking to develop the sport. It wasn't even in the Olympics yet. So they offered me a 1-year scholarship with them to, develop me as an athlete and to see if I liked it as a sport. And that was something that I wanted to pursue. And it was all very new to me and my family as well. But I knew I could swim and I could run. I just had to learn how to ride a bike. And yeah, that's sort of how it all started. And after my first year of that scholarship, I had earned my place in the junior elite triathlon squad. So that was kind of grueling, but it also, I really loved it because I was, 15, 16, just finishing school as well. And I think that having the duality of being an elite athlete and then also doing school and also studying my certificate 3 and 4 in fitness, it really opened my eyes, my mind, my heart to my true potential. And now as an adult and in my life, I know my capabilities and how much I can hold and what I can do mentally and physically. So yeah, I'm really grateful for that experience. But yeah, that's how it all started.
That's so cool. Like from a young age, as kids, we're always pursued to do certain sports or activities, but you literally just dove straight into the hardest thing while still studying, being at school, being a teenager as well. Did that impact any other areas of your life during the trainings around that?
Yeah, I think in terms of being a teenager, I didn't experience certain social things such as, parties and drinkings and things like that. But that's not really something that I was ever really drawn to or something that I wanted to do. My passion from a young age has been to support and empower women. And yeah, it just so happened to be that it was through health and fitness now, but I just knew that I had to follow my heart and to do what I wanted to do. And those kinds of things were a little bit misaligned. Sometimes, I just wanted to catch the school bus with other kids after school instead of mum picking me up and taking me to training. But those are sort of, the smaller things that at the time I thought I was missing out. But, looking at the greater scheme of things, it's like I wasn't really missing out at all. And yeah, I'm so proud of myself.
Yeah, totally. You should totally be proud of yourself. Like, it takes a lot of courage, especially as a teenager, to put yourself first towards, not necessarily a career, but it was more like a sports pathway for you to, gain a little bit of clarity of, as you said, like finding the passion in fitness that actually led you to being a coach these days. So, from the sounds of things, it was kind of like a blessing for you to go down that pathway.
Yeah, definitely. And my parents were super supportive and they always wanted the best for me. And I have a younger sister as well. So we were both always heavily involved in sports. And I think they really encouraged us to try a lot of sports from a young age and to figure out what we really liked. So for my sister, she was more involved in team sports like touch football, and she was in swimming teams as well. Whereas for me, it was like a little bit more different. So I really love versatility in sports and how we can, try different things and find what we loved. But yeah, in terms of the support at home, my parents always made sure that, I was eating appropriately. I had the right supplements and vitamins if I needed them. And then, of course, with my scholarship with the Queensland Academy of Sport, they offered, professional support like psychologists and sports nutritionists and things like that. So that was really helpful for my family to have that kind of support at home as well.
Yeah, totally. I loved how you had that support from, other professions during that time of, you being like an athlete pretty much, because when we grow up as teenagers, we tend to just do sports at school. And I know for a fact when I was a dancer years ago, I didn't necessarily get the help of, whether it was like a therapist or whether it was a nutritionist. It was just like you just go out and dancing, where I really like how you mentioned that, you had the nutritionist, you have the psychologist, and you were able to quickly find yourself in a better position to perform as well, which is awesome because, again, from a young age, it's really easy to feel a little bit of hesitation. Like you said, you didn't necessarily need the partying, but again, as a teenager girl, it's just like, ooh, like I wouldn't mind doing X, Y, and Z with friends, but you said you had to do the other stuff to become the best version as an athlete. So I think that's really cool. Now, in terms of like the triathlon training, let's talk a little bit about that, because I reckon that's something that will be really cool for our listeners to understand.
Yeah, it was quite grueling, like in the guts of it, but it was also, a really funny and interesting experience when I first started, because in terms of learning how to ride a bike, I already knew how to ride a bike, just like a normal bike around the streets as a kid, but it was, a road bike and something that athletes used to compete. And so it's not really something that I was familiar with being able to use as a tool. And I remember my first triathlon session on the bike, I was moving my legs so fast that I couldn't believe it. And I was watching my feet move, and I just rode straight into a parked car and ended up snapping off the side mirror. And my coach turned around and just like, "What are you doing?" So that was hilarious. Although, my parents didn't really like it that we had to get the car fixed. But yeah, it was, when I look back, I can see like funny moments like that of just really getting in there and just giving it a go, even though I didn't know what I was doing. But later on, as I developed as an athlete, the training was, kind of quite grueling, because I'm not training for just one sport. It's 3 sports, which is the swim, the bike, and the run. So I had to make sure that each one of those legs was quite strong. And then small things that, you wouldn't necessarily think of, such as transition. So I would do training sessions just to practice going from the swim to the bike and just making sure that I could get ahead or minimize, seconds here and there that were really important. So yeah, the training was a lot, but it also was really eye-opening. And one of the most interesting training sessions that I loved was when they were assessing our lactic acid threshold, and we were asked to run a certain amount of distance, and then they would prick our finger or prick our ear and take our blood, and then we'd follow like a similar recovery process and then run a certain distance again. So we would just do this training session where throughout the session they were taking our blood and tracking our lactic acid threshold. And it turned out mine was actually quite high, which was so surprising and interesting to learn at being such a young age. So that not only gave me an advantage as an athlete, but it allowed me to really learn about my body and, how it operates.
I think that's really cool, especially from a young age. Like, we don't have much of understanding as we grow up, and you had that input from, well, what age was that, like 15 or 16?
Yeah, so I got the scholarship when I was 14, and then by the time I was 15, I was junior elite. So yeah, quite young.
Yeah, so that's crazy, because to think like as a teenager, and most of us, well, I know I didn't have any idea about all of that when I was that age. So for you to go into that experience and open your eyes to having a better understanding of how your body works, I think that's fascinating, because again, you've taken that on board, not just as a triathlon athlete, but into your coaching now. Not necessarily, doing blood tests with your clients, but you have an indication of how they can indicate with their threshold in terms of, cardio, conditioning, exercises. Now, for our listeners who don't know how the triathlon race works, can you please explain to us, what are the first, what does it consist of? Because I know sometimes they run them quite differently.
Yeah, so the first leg is always a swim, and I would generally race either a 750 meter swim or a 1 kilometer swim. And then once we get out of the ocean or the pool or the open water, we would get on a bike, and that would generally be a 20 kilometer bike ride.
Wow.
And then it was good. And then after that, we would go into a run, and that would usually be a 5 kilometer run.
That's crazy. And how long would that triathlon take?
Oh goodness. Yeah, it really depends. I won't remember my times off by heart. My dad was, the one that was really invested in the bikes and making sure I had all the latest gear and making sure he was there with the stopwatch timing all my splits. So he'd be able to rattle it all off to you.
We'll ask Dad next time.
I should. Yeah, definitely. I should ask him for sure. One thing that varied though is a thing called drafting. So when you're in the cycle leg, drafting is basically if you're cycling behind someone and you're sort of in that wind gap where if they're in front of you, they're breaking the wind for you, and sort of it's pulling you along in a sense. So that's called drafting. And there are some races that are draft legal and not draft legal. So some races you're allowed to go straight behind the other cyclist and sit, wheel to wheel, and other races you have to go a certain amount of meters apart. And there is a thing called draft busters. And what they used to do is come by in mopeds or cars, and if you got caught drafting in a draft legal race, you would have to stop immediately in your spot. And depending on what they said and what the rules of the race were, some people had to hold their bike over their head, some people had to wait for a certain amount of time. So it was always a thing where, you had to make sure you were following the rules. And if the draft busters were coming, you have to make sure that,
I love the
you
name.
weren't within those meters. Yeah.
Draft
and if
busters.
it was a draft, yeah. Yeah, if it was a draft legal race, you had to actually get your drafting license as well. So there was a whole process to be able to draft safely and to be allowed to compete in those races.
That's crazy to think that there's again, like I would have no clue about triathlon because I've never done one, but it's just fascinating to see how many rules or how different ways, you know, you can participate. And around the cycling thing, that's really fascinating. Like I could just imagine if I was one of those bike riders, I would totally get busted, 100%. Have you ever got busted?
No, I never got busted, but there was a few times where I rode past some of my friends or, you know, people that I knew from training that had gotten busted. And it was always a big thing that we talk about after the race. Oh, so-and-so got busted.
So good. Talk of the day whenever someone gets busted. I love it.
Yeah.
So good. Have you done most of your triathlons in Queensland or is it like across the country as well?
Yeah, so I've traveled nationally competing.
Awesome.
And I actually won one of the Australian championships in St Kilda in Melbourne, which we were just talking about before we turned on the recording. So yeah, I know it very well. And it was very cold and it was a race where, you know, it was 3 legs and 3 seasons in one day. And
welcome to Melbourne.
Yeah. Yeah, so I've traveled around and competed in different places. One of the biggest triathlon events of the year is in Noosa, which my sister's actually racing in this year in a team sport. So she's going to do the swim leg and then she'll tag a friend to do the cycle, who will then tag a friend to do the run. So yeah, if you can get to the Noosa Triathlon Festival at the end of the year, that's very exciting and very busy. And they have a few different events there, like you can do just an ocean swim, and they have a run event the day before the triathlon too. So yeah, something to look into.
Well, for whoever is in Noosa, our podcast listeners, head down there if you're into triathlons or even just to support. I'm sure that you get massive crowds during that time.
Yeah, it gets very busy. I think most of the accommodations booked out.
Oh, I bet. Yeah, I'm sure. So with, you know, when did you end participating in the triathlons?
Actually, that was an interesting story too.
That was
probably around, I think I must have been about 19, if I remember. And my dad and I were sitting at a table with, I won't say the brand, but a big well-known brand. And they just slid a piece of paper across the table to me, offering me a large sponsorship. And I just slid it back and said, I quit in the meeting. And yeah, that was how I retired. And I think it was just, I had gotten to a point where winning and racing had only sort of gotten me so far personally. And I found one time I was standing on the podium and it just kind of felt a little bit hollow, like I wasn't helping other people, I was just helping myself. And it was sort of like, oh, why am I here wanting to beat everyone, when, you know, I was a qualified trainer and I, like I was saying previously, I was really passionate about helping women, and I felt like I had to do the next thing and I had outgrown that stage of my life. So yeah, I retired and went straight into health and fitness coaching, and that's where I found the next level of fulfillment.
So cool. I love that. And now you've been coaching. How long have you been coaching women for now?
15 years.
There you go. Amazing. And during these 15 years, have you realized the main niche of women that you're wanting to support, or is it more like a broad spectrum of women? Yeah,
so I've noticed that my niche has changed as I've grown and changed, and as I've experienced life and the things that I've learned and developed along the way. So yeah, as of now, I help women maximize their energy to increase their productivity so that they can be more present with their families. And I think that's so important. A lot of people will look at it thinking, you know, it's mostly set, but energy is probably the biggest part in health and fitness, if not our lives. And yeah, it's something that programs really hone in on and teach now. And that's come from me just going through burnout and having to learn to rediscover myself and rediscover health and fitness in a way that I love, which has been such a beautiful journey now because I've created such an incredible program to be able to support other women in that now.
So good. I love that because, as we grow, our clients grow with us. And, again, it's a cycle of life. We're realizing what's important for us and we attract more clients who are wanting that same feeling as we are. And I love that you mentioned that it's not necessarily just about fat loss, it's about energy. And I think that's it's something different. Not many out there predominantly focusing on just the energy side of things. It's very, physical stuff. And it's important to also focus on the internal things that are going around. I love that. So good. Now, are you doing more coaching online or do you see clients in person as well?
Yes, I've got a bit of both. I've just started in-person outdoor group sessions again. I did have a gym that I closed at the start of last year, just when I was going through, my burnout, and I took a bit of a step back. But most of my client base is online, and I have a fitness app. And then, I've just started doing outdoor group sessions as well. So I have a mixture available.
So good. Let's talk about a bit about burnout, because I know some of our listeners are going to become PTs in the future, or they're already personal trainers. And I know from experience, I've experienced the burnout. I've been there, done that many, many, many times. When you reached that point of burnout, what was that switch that you just wanted to change?
Even now, just saying burnout or admitting burnout is so hard for me because it feels like it's not really something that I want to accept or admit. But I think it's really important for people to be aware of, especially trainers, because I know personally for me in my journey, it was a lot of give, and not really focusing on myself and, energizing myself. But the biggest switch for me was just reaching a point where I was just tired all the time. I was dragging myself through my days, and I just reached a point where I just wanted to change that, and there was nothing that was going to stop me. And so it was pretty much making the decision and then, taking the action and doing the thing. So I wrote down the steps that I thought that I needed to take. And it's really interesting because when I made that decision, I thought I was going to have to sort of have this battle or fight against myself in terms of mental toughness with, getting back on the horse and doing the things that I needed to do. But after a few days and looking back, it's almost like I had thought it was going to be this big, hard thing in my mind. And it really wasn't. It was about, action and taking the small steps. And I guess everything that I've built into my programs now, it's a bit hard to explain quickly here on a podcast, but it's every little thing as well as consistency that, can really help transform your life. And once you make that decision and commit to it, I think, that's like probably the most important thing, is getting started and committing to the change.
Yeah, totally. And I can totally relate to that. It's just getting started and doing something about it. And like you said, as long as it's just something small, taking those baby steps to build, a healthier you, because again, if you're burnt out, you're not going to be able to serve your clients as good as you want to. And I think that's very important as personal trainers, because we're here to serve. We're here to help our clients, to guide them, to educate them, to teach them. But we also need to take a break from that stuff as well and just have more of self-care and self-love towards our journey, because we love to train as well. So if you're burnt out, you're not going to be able to train. You'll just, be wanting to sit on the couch all day, every day. So again, it's just finding that balance. And I guess balance looks different to everyone. My balance will look different to yours. What's one tip that you could give our listeners in terms of, removing themselves from a burnout state?
I think try to be aware of, signs of feeling tired and unmotivated. So try to catch it before you hit that wall, and then start taking little steps such as rest and recovery if you need it, making sure you're drinking enough water, making sure you're eating appropriately. I know one thing for me is it was super easy to skip out water and meals because I was focusing on getting my clients trained and giving them what they wanted. But yeah, if you can schedule in time to prioritize those little things and make little promises to yourself, I think it's going to make a really big difference in terms of catching it before it comes.
Yeah, awareness is key. And so many of us, have lived lately without being too aware of our habits. And then once you place it on paper or even just tracking it on your phone, you realize, oh my God, I'm actually not doing that well. Let's take a step back and reassess everything.
Yeah, and also to not be too hard on yourself, because if you feel that you're not making the same positive steps and habits and consistency that you were a year ago, that's also okay. And taking small steps towards getting back to there, or what makes you feel good, and loving exercise and fueling yourself with good nutrition is the most important thing. So just honoring that, and not sort of beating yourself up too much about it.
Yeah, so true. It's something that I need to do more often as well. I think we all do. I think that's what the past couple of years has taught us, to just take a step back and relax into it, and not so much focus on just being busy all the time.
Yeah, definitely. And I heard a quote the other day, and it was something like, you are most capable to serve the woman that you once were. And so also appreciating, the person that you have been throughout the years, and realizing that, your mess can become your message, and the things that you're learning and growing through actually will allow you to be able to help others.
That's really powerful. I love that. When you find that quote, send it to me.
Yeah, I think it was you were most qualified to serve the woman you once were. But yeah, I'll definitely find it and send it through.
I love that. That's a really powerful quote. It's so cool. What's the plan for the rest of 2021? I was about to say 2020.
That happens to me too. It's just become a mashup of years.
Seriously, let's mash 2020 and 2021 together, okay?
Yeah, it feels like it's been one big long year. Yeah, so career-wise, there's only a couple of months left of the year, so I've got some goals, some business goals to help a certain amount of women in my programs by the end of the year. So I'll be making sure I'm staying on track with that, and especially coming into the festive season and summer in Australia, I know that it's a time when a lot of women are more open to making positive health changes in their lives. So just making sure that I'm on track with how I can serve and the offerings that I have, but then also giving to myself. So I'm going back to Hamilton Island for a holiday in a few weeks, which I've been looking forward to all year. And we're going with a bunch of friends, so that'll be something that I'm making sure that I'm really present on as well, and just taking that time to enjoy the week and then come back clearer and ready to serve.
I love that. So good. And what about personal goals? What are you going to do for the next couple of months?
What do you mean personal goals? I think
I got you strapped. You're like, what do you mean?
Yeah, well, I guess because, sometimes I can be so enmeshed in my career and, helping others through health and fitness that it's almost like the goals in my career are the goals in terms of personal development. And I think in terms of personal goals, but then also my personal development feeds into that. So my own personal goals will still line up with my career goals, which line up with being able to serve and help others. So it's kind of like I would have to take a really big step back and have a look at all that, because there's so much that comes into it. Like, there's, I want to make sure I'm reading for an hour a day of a personal development book, and, just taking consistent steps to be in line with my greater, bigger goal. But there's nothing specifically personally other than learning free diving that I would like to do by the end of the year.
That's a personal goal. Yeah.
Yeah, I really like scuba diving in the oceans. So yeah, I'd love to be able to do it without equipment. And I think free diving would feel so free. But yeah, aside from that, that's it really.
Well, let's look forward towards that. I think that's an awesome goal. So
Thank
good.
you.
Now, Asha, before we finish up today, where can our listeners find you?
I think probably the best place to connect is either Facebook or Instagram. So you can have a look for my name there, which is Asha Burnley. Otherwise, jump on my website, but I do prefer to connect on social media. So yeah,
social media is the way these days.
Yeah, definitely.
It's the place to be. I love it. Well, Asha, thank you so much for joining me today. It has been an absolute pleasure hearing about your journey of not just becoming a triathlon champion, but also a women's coach. And I know, through the work that you're doing and you're going to be continuing doing, you're going to be changing a lot of women's lives. And I'm really excited to hear more about it. So for our listeners, whoever has enjoyed today, please make sure to screenshot and tag the Women's Fitness Academy's podcast, and tag myself and Asha, which her Facebook, her Instagram page was Asha Burnley. Until next time, girls, I hope you have a wonderful day. Bye.